We are still in the 90s, and that's not a reference to my dress sense. This is about the Bitmap Brothers and the Chaos Engine. Last week we had the delectable Speedball 2, and the music connoisseurs among you will notice a similar vein in quality with the sound production. This game is an absolute stunner, and it did some things so ahead of its time that some games are still catching up now. I want to talk about this intro because it's lengthy and it changed depending on what system you were viewing the game on. What it did was list all of the playable characters. Now that brings me over to the box art. The box art for this particular game is the drabbest, I think, of their whole series, but what they were concentrating on is the role-playing idea of taking on these different characters, so they plastered them right on the front of the box. I do love the black flushness of it all. Even the cartridge was nice and flush and black and dark looking, so they went in the right direction there with a theme. Now, one of the aesthetic themes is Victorian steampunk. Remember, we're in 1992. You ask a millennium about where steampunk came from, they'll probably tell you that Hassan Piker invented it. So all these new ideas are flooding into my boy-sized head, and the idea of being able to control and roleplay as a particular character who has unique stats and maybe different weapons. And I loved the caricature pictures of them all. They all looked dark and brooding, and there was a brilliant little description. Little did we know that they vary slightly different from each other. There are cool weapons to be had with each unique character, but as far as move speed and anything else goes, slots or stuff like that, no, it was basic stuff. But this is, for me, where it started, and I'm talking about the character-based action role-playing game, and the top-down shooter genre was kind of born here for me. Another thing that we take for granted a little bit now is that a AAA game from a leading studio, and it was kind of their peak, I think. Bitmap didn't really get much higher than this with numbers and with popularity. It wasn't downhill after this game, but this was their peak area. But my point being, of course it was going to be couch co-op. Yeah, why wouldn't it be? That was the way forward for loads of these games, mainly because the internet wasn't around, and the more people they could rope into a gaming session, the better. But it was just so cool. Everybody knew that this was going to be an absolute couch co-op hit, just looking at the box. Just back to that console, because I was blabbering when it was on screen. This shows the difference in stats on the character. See that blue and green bar adjusting there? I mean, to my original comment, it wasn't mammoth. There were differences, but to us as kids, this was like a colossal game mechanic. They even put these like really deep backstory text against them, which had no inclination whatsoever on anything that happened in game. Did you get a different ending depending on what character you played as? I'm 90% sure that's a no. Everyone got the same damned ending. But to my point, this was step one to playing as a prefabricated character with a backstory that had different weapons to whatever else you chose. It was a variety in a video game that I hadn't come across before. I want to talk about its controls, because if you're watching, you'll realise that you can only fire in the direction you were facing. This is a twin stick that you had to play on one stick. It worked. We didn't know any better, and of course if you wanted to retreat and fire, you had to retreat, turn around, fire, retreat, a bit like playing StarCraft. Robotron had been out. The idea of facing one way and shooting another wasn't completely fresh, but it just didn't get implemented into this game, mainly because you didn't have two crosshairs or two sticks, so it just would have been a bloomin' nightmare. I was of course on my trusty Python 1, which also had an auto fire option. I'm pretty sure that was implemented with this. It didn't have hold down and keep firing as an option.
They are safe. No activated.
Back to that character differential, they did have different specials. You can see the icons down on the UI at the bottom of the screen there. The priest had health, I think, to be given to himself or another player, and one of them had like a demolition explosive, so it was synergizing. There was that step there early doors, and it was very cool to pick two people that complemented each other. Other than the finale fight, there are no real boss fights involving like big lumberous creatures or like a unique enemy. There was a lot of arena style, trapped in an area, do a wave system, or there was a lot of puzzles involving a damn key and doors. That nearly broke me. I seem to remember backtracking and just getting lost in these labyrinth style levels. let's get to versions, and we're looking at the Amiga 500. This was the original copy of the game that I purchased and bought and played. We did see a very good edition on the Mega Drive, which actually had a better system of UI. It was semi-see-through. Also, a slightly richer colour palette, but not a richer sound.
Activated.
There was this Amiga CD32 edition of the game, which in my eyes is one of the best looking versions of it. Nice high frame rate, you've got that depth in colour, and you've got some pretty cool resolution. It was quite a powerful system anyway, and it could be bolted onto your standard Amiga. It was kind of like an upgrade, a bit like the Sega CD, so this was definitely the best place to play the Chaos Engine. We had a sequel come out in 1996. This was when Bitmap was sort of sailing into some dangerous seas. We only see one official title from the studio after this called Z, which is not a very memorable piece of programming, but holy crap, look at this. It's split screen autonomous. This is amazing, and look at the artwork on the actual sprites themselves. It's got a Zelda kind of theme to it, and it is really quite impressive with a lot of its ideas. The enemies aren't too worrying, and it doesn't look like they've sucked up much of that steampunk Victorian idea, but to have a full-blown split screen top down like this was so welcome, and I cannot believe I didn't play it. So it was 3 years later, 1996, and I can straight up see quite a lot of repeat assets from the original game. And if you were to take that split out and look at it with a sort of fresh pair of eyes, there's not really that much difference, but there wasn't an evolution in systems either. You're still using the same amount of CPU. I'm not too sure how long I could put up with that soundtrack for. It's certainly a jump from the original soundtrack on the Chaos Engine 1, and of course Renegade were involved on that front. Betty Boo, Magic Pockets, those guys knew how to make a good sounding game. Okay, I think that might be your lot. I have been Couch Coop. This was Couch Coop Classics. I'm going to build a playlist. I want to get to 6 videos, otherwise that looks weird on the homepage, but links to the other games. I've done Metal Slug, we've done Snow Brothers, and of course we had a look at the amazing Speedball 2 last week. Link in description, annotations. I'll see you then!